Just to recap, over here the Alter Rebbe is discussing that just like in the Nefesh Elokis, in the godly soul, there's the 10 spheres and its garments, which is the Chochmah Bina Das, and then the 7 Midas, and then the 3 garments which we discussed in the previous chapters. So too, in the animal soul also, there is a whole set of the 10 spheres, which is again in this case they're called crowns of impurity, which are the 7 negative characters which exist within man. And then he has the Seichel HaMelida, and he has the intellect which produce these negative traits and characters, as we were just discussing. That the just like the animal, he says over here that dealing with the animal soul, and he says Chacham Bina Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Does an animal have wisdom, understanding, and knowledge? And we just concluded, yes, it has the intellect which explains it how to be the animal, how to indulge in animalistic interests, and in order to be more animal. It has the intellect. He knows where to go to eat, and it knows where to go to sleep. And as we mentioned, to classify the animal is whatever contributes to its comfort. That's what it does. If you look at the animal, not necessarily bad. We were discussing before why the Alter Rebbe says klipas nega. The animal that exists within the yid, which is his nefesh Avraham, his animal soul. It doesn't come from shalosh klipas atameis. It doesn't come from the lower level of klipa, of impurity, which cannot be transformed. It can be transformed. We mentioned before, it's a pasuk. You could love Hashem with all your heart. And the Torah uses a plural expression, because not only with your godly soul, with your animal soul as well. But defining the animal soul is that the animal soul also has its intellectual dimension. But again, not to say the animals are intellectual, but it has that intellectual dimension which contributes or which produces its characters in order to be an animal. So too, in our nefesh bahamis, it's not just randomly we express ourselves animalistically. We have it's a system. We have a certain the animal within ourselves also has the intellectual dimension, which produces these negative character traits. The reason why a person can have negative character traits, which is again associated with the animal soul, is because there's an intellectual process which produces them, which produces these midas, these negative characters. In other words, the way the nefesh bahamis within the yid expresses itself, that it pursues that path of being a behema, of being animalistic. It doesn't just start from midas. It starts and just becomes out of nowhere. These characters, the animalistic characters. No, there's chochmah bina das. There's an intellect, and there was wisdom, understanding of knowledge associated with the animal soul, which produce these negative animalistic character traits. Where do we see in general that midas, which is character traits, are produced by intellect? Where do we know this? Where do we see this? Alter Rebbe had it before when he dealt with the godly soul, but Alter Rebbe brings an evident proof over here. When you see that hamidas lefi erech haseichel, that the characters of man is according to his intellect. You see a child desires and has a love to things which are trivial, which are meaningless. Why so? Put down, we said it the other day as well, you put down 10 lollipops, you put down a $100 bill, he's taking the 10 lollipops. Not only with a $100 bill you can buy something which is worthy to buy more than lollipops. You could buy 1,000 lollipops, let's say. 100 lollipops. I know today's different, right? You buy 100 lollipops. But he's going to take that. Why? Because his intellect is short-circuited. He doesn't have that capacity, the intellectual capacity, to understand that these things are trivial. So we see his mind is short. In other words, he doesn't have that broad understanding that to try to achieve and try to seek things which are worthwhile to seek, worthwhile to achieve. Worthwhile, yikari means more expensive. Literally, yikari means expensive. So what do we see? Well, Alter Rebbe is bringing a proof over here that characters of man is always according to a seichel, Intellect produces character traits. Character traits don't come out of nowhere. According to the person's understanding in something, that's the way he developed. The person, you understand that this is good, you have a drive to it, drive in the context of love. Before you knew that it was good, before you intellectually understood that thing is good and it's worthwhile, at least worthwhile from the animal soul, as we're dealing with the animal soul over here, that it's good to pursue, you would never have a drive to it.
So character traits are not inherited.
You know what? They could be inherited, but what brings them out from a state of concealment to a state of revelation? When do they become manifest? Is when they're fed intellectually. In other words, when you want to, for example, you find a little computer, right? Before you knew what that computer is all about, you didn't have a drive to it, even from the business point of view, or from just as another gadget point of view. To you, it could be a piece of plastic, and to make a little noise, and it's just you see certainly. But someone sits down with you and explains you how this could do so much. Again, it could be from the business point of view. It could explain you how you can make so much money with it, or even how you can have a good time with it. So once intellectually you understand, then and only then you develop a drive to that computer. As just a quick example. When you say a drive is associated with love. Love is
so the root drive could be inherited, but how it's manifested.
Absolutely. We have it within ourselves. Very good you're pointing that out. Because midas is something which is part and parcel of the person, characters. But nonetheless, where are the characters being driven to? According to exactly how it unfolds. This is all how it's fed intellectually. So, and we see it again. The same child, when he gets older, his own characters are different than when he's young. As Al Rebbe says in the opposite, for example, children get angry. You took away a little candy from them. They get angry, and they could fight because of things which are trivial, small, trivial. And the same child, when he grows up, his midas, his characters change. Why do they change? It's the same person. The answer is because he grew up, so his intellectual capacity has broadened. He understands what is worth to invest and what is not worth to invest, and what is worth to stay away from and what is worth not to stay away from. And you have it. So again, you see that what ultimately produces character traits, in other words, the way the character traits unfold within man, is all depends how is it is function of his intellectual faculties. And so to be Sparrows, what he takes pride of, and his glory, Visharmidus, and his other characters. So this Al Rebbe is saying kind of parenthetically, or just bringing a proof that midas are produced, characters are produced according to Seichel. So when you say that man, the animal soul as well, has 7 character traits, you must say that the animal soul also has Chacham Bina Das, has intellect, because the midas of the animal, the midas, the negative traits of the animal soul, the only reason they come to fruition, or they develop, or they express themselves, is only because there's Chacham Bina Das of the Nefesh Bahamis. So by the Nefesh Bahamis, just like by the Nefesh Elikis, there's 10. We should make no mistake that it's only 7 over here. And again, the whole reason, just to clarify, the whole reason why we think it's 7, because it's an animal. And by the animal you see much more than midas, in other words, his characters, much more than his intellect. You look at an animal, you see much more character than intellect. So Alter Rebbe says, make no mistake, even within an animal, Alter Rebbe doesn't say the animal, but because it exists within the animal soul, within the Yid. It also exists with the animal, like we said before. It knows where to go and knows how and where to express. In other words, intellectually, it explains itself how to be more animalistic. And similar to ourselves, how to express the midas, rois, and the negative character traits, is because we have Chacham Bina Das. So when we deal with the number which exists within the animal soul, it's equal to the number which exists in the godly soul. There is 10, here is also 10, not 7. So the Esef is these 10 levels again, which is the intellectual dimension, which is the Chabad of the Nefesh Bahamis, and the 10 and the 7 midas rois of the Nefesh Bahamis. If you notice, Al Rebbe saying means say they invest in their own garments. Just like we said by the Nefesh Elikis, the godly soul, that when the 10 spheres, when it performs a mitzvah, what happens? The 10 spheres, the godly soul invests in the thought of Torah, invests in speech, meaning in the garment of speech. Remember, we said speech is a garment, action is a garment. Here too, these 10 spheres, these 10 levels, which means they invest in their own garment, which is the garment of the nefesh bahamis, of the animal soul. Oy medaber, you see right over here, machshava, dibur, maisa. You see it so clearly. Machshava, dibur, maisa. When they think in an animalistic fashion. Oy medaber, they speak in animalistic fashion. Oy oisa, or they act animalistic. So the thought, which is again the garment over his brain, and the garment of speech, which is again in his mouth, and the energy of action, which is in hand, and all these other limbs, they're called levushim misavu, they're called the garments of impurity, to these 10 impure levels. They invest in them. In what? In the thought and speech and action of the animal soul. Bishas maisa, when he expresses himself, and again, animalistic, a dibur, a machshava, or via speech or via thought. So the Rebbe is saying over here is that it works exactly like it works in the godly soul. Just like the godly soul, we said in Perek Gimel and Dalet, there's the 10 levels of the godly soul, and these 10 levels of the godly soul invest, like we learned before in the beginning of the Perek Dalet. They invest in the thought, speech, and action of the godly soul. So too, the nefesh bahamis, there's the Esei P'chinas Elutmeis, these 10 impure levels, and they invest in the thought, speech, and action of the animal soul. In other words, the animal soul as well have the 3 garments, the impure 3 garments. The Alter Rebbe continues and says, when we speak about machshava dibur maisa associated with the animal soul, do we have to look for anything in particular? So someone's going to obviously say maisa of an animal soul is aveda, or dibur, speech which is not associated, which is prohibited by Torah, for example, lashon hara, rechilos, litzanis, or a thought which Torah says that is prohibited. One is prohibited to entertain his mind with certain thoughts. So that's what one is going to immediately understand when you're dealing with the thought, speech, and garments, thought, speech, and action, rather, the garments of the animal soul. How do they express themselves with anything which is not aligned with Torah? Comes the Alter Rebbe and says the fact that we're dealing with an animal soul, and we said the animal soul comes from klipas nega. In other words, from the neutral level of klipa, not from the shalosh klipas atmeis, which again we're going to deal with later. As we said it briefly, that there's 2 levels in klipa and sitracha. One, which is shalosh klipas atmeis, where one can never engage with and never believe that he could elevate them. We gave the example: no one could ever say, "I'm going to take a non-kosher piece of meat. I'm hungry. I want to learn a piece of Gemara. I'm going to take a non-kosher piece of meat, consume it, and with that chayis, I'm going to learn a piece of Gemara." Physically, it could happen, but you're not only not elevating it, it's bringing you down with the Gemara, which you're learning as well. So a person has to be careful, particularly in kashrus and so on, because something which Torah says you're not allowed to, you cannot elevate it. As opposed to an apple. An apple is neutral. Before you do a mitzvah with it, it's not a pair of tefillin. A pair of tefillin has a chetza shel kedusha, it's kaddish on its own. An apple is neutral. But an apple can go both ways. If I eat it, even I make a bracha, but I eat it without a godly purpose, or especially when I take the energy of the apple that I'm eating, let's speak lashon hara after. So I brought the energy of the apple down to the world of lashon hara. But if I learn a piece of Gemara after I eat the apple, so it gives me strength. So not only the Gemara is elevated, and I'm elevated via the Gemara, but the apple itself is elevated. For that matter, later on, that's the whole purpose. We come down to this world, we engage with the physical in order to elevate the physical. Not only to give us chayis, to give us the energy in order that we should be able to be formed Torah mitzvahs. We elevate the entire world because that gives us chayis in order to live and to exist and to learn and to daven and to do mitzvahs and give tzedakah and so on. So the nefesh bahamis, the entire package of the nefesh bahamis, including all its 10 levels and all these 3 garments, because it's connected to klipas nega, in other words, to that neutral level of klipa, we need not look for the aveira, for something which is a clear transgression, to say that the garment of the animal soul associated with thought, speech, and action is precisely dafka, a garment which is associated with clear sin. Not necessarily. Because the whole idea which Alter Rebbe is trying to convey over here is just not Kedusha. It's not the level of the Nefesh Elikis. It's not holy. What is one step which is lower than holiness? Practically everything under the sun. It's a famous expression of the Shlomo Melech. Tachas Hashem. Alter Rebbe in Kabbalah says in Zayir also, Teira Mitzvahs is mi'al shimsha. It's higher than the sun. It doesn't mean physically in place. It means it's transcended. It's something which is higher than the norm. Anything which is not associated with Teira Mitzvahs, with Kedusha, it's under the sun. Tachas Hashemesh, which is again based on Shlomo Melech's expression. Hevel Avolim, it's all vanity, it's Tachas Hashemesh, under the sun. So when you're dealing with the Nefesh Bahamis, Alter Rebbe makes it very clear. You don't have to drop to the world of Avera. Something things Torah says clearly, do not think about it, or speak lashon hara, or something which is distinct in Avera, or something which is an action which is clearly an Avera transgression. No, the Alter Rebbe says vehein when you're dealing with thought, speech, and action of the nefesh of an animal soul, kol hamasim shetnasim tachas hashemesh. Everything which is done under the sun, which means does not have a direct link to kedusha, to holiness, it's all associated with the animal soul. A thought which is not leading to or part of or contributes to anything holy, it's under the sun, it's an expression, a thought, it's an expression of the Nefesh Bahamis. It's a garment, the thought of garment of the animal soul. And similarly speech, if there's no link to Kedusha, this speech is not going to lead me. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's learning Gemara or learning the Gid. If you're saying you're mechazik someone a good word, for example, you do a favor or you speak to someone kindly, or anything which is ultimately going to have a link to Kedusha, that is in the world of Kedusha. But if it doesn't have to be on its own asur. It doesn't have to be something which is clearly, directly connected to the Nefesh Shlosh that's amazing. It's not Kedusha, no link to Kedusha, that's Tachas Hashemesh under the sun, it's associated with the Nefesh Bahamis of the animal soul. And similarly in mice, it doesn't have to be like outright Avera. Anything which does not have a link to Kedusha is already under the sun, means it's associated to an action, associated with Nefesh Bahamis.
There's nothing negative about these traits when it's in the Bahamas. Right?
If it's nothing negative,
why? The Bahamas, when it's only in the Bahamas, not in.
But why do you say that it's nothing negative? Just try to explain me why. If it's not kedusha, well, let's say take for example this.
Hashem created the Bahama with a purpose and gave.
Right, but what's the purpose? When we mentioned before also neutral in the car, you have reverse, and you have you go ahead, then you have the neutral. You have the gear of neutral. Neutral is not something on its own. It's just to stand there and tell you, or you're going front or you're going back. The whole Nefesh Bahamis is called that neutral klipa because it is
in the human being. It is
right.
What I'm saying is that the qualities, the midos of the Bahama in the human being are at best neutral and probably a little bit to the wrong side of it.
Okay.
Right. But they are perfectly suited to the Bahama.
Right.
They're perfectly suited to the animal, and God created them.
Right, but what's the purpose?
Within the animal, it seems to me that it's a positive trait for the animal.
Right, but
the cow without it can't exist.
Correct. But I'm asking with the animal within ourselves, what Hashem gave us in Nefesh Bahamis, it can never transform. But what part of it? The entire animal should be transformed. Okay. Which means if I have, for example, a trait that I'm driven, I have a trait that whatever I come in contact with, I'm driven to it disproportionate to other people. So usually it can be very dangerous because the fact is you have your 2 feet on the ground in Elam Hazeh. It's most likely that if you're not going to train that animal, it's going to be driven with greater passion to things which it sees and it comes in contact with. The same day Hashem says in the Torah, take that passion and take that drive and transform it to godliness. How do you do it? Obviously, join a Torah class and join a Fabrengen or whatever you want. Do something, work with that animal will transform. So when Hashem tells us that V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, it only means just one part of the animal associated with heart or love should be transformed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem wants the entire animal to be transformed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if a person has chesed, gvura, tiferes, again, the whole setup in the animal soul, every part of it should be transformed. And it's easier said than done, but that's what we're here for, to transform, to work on our midas, to be transformed. Everything should be driven, or everything should be focused on God and godliness. And the same thing when a person has the garment, dealing with the garments of the Nefesh Bahamis. If he has thoughts, it should be utilized thoughts of the Torah, or thoughts which are going to ultimately contribute to Kedusha in many, many different ways. We mentioned, when we started this the other day, we spoke about this Pedic, and we said the famous Rambam. Al Rebbe doesn't quote the Rambam over here, but the Rambam says, what part of the day does a person serve Hashem? So one's going to say instinctively, when he learns Torah and he goes to Shul Davens, the Minyan answers, Amin Yesh Mirabo, shakes a lulav and esrog, lights a lot of Shabbos candles. You could find from the whole package of the week, you can find many, many hours that the person involved in the Beit Hashem. Comes the Rambam and says, no. The Rambam says a person can serve Hashem 24 hours a day. When he sleeps, he can serve Hashem. When he eats, he can serve Hashem. Every action what he engages with, associated with the guf, even the guf and the nefesh habahamis, associated with his bodily reality, if it has an objective and a goal to lead to something godly, in other words, there's a godly objective and goal, that itself is a godly action. A person sleeps because he's tired, and he knows he'll get that 5 hours sleep, and he's going to get up be able to get up next morning with a chayis and learn and daven. Avodas Hashem doesn't begin when the alarm clock rings and he says Maidani. The 5 hours that he's sleeping, that's part of Avodas Hashem. So and this is why I mentioned a few times over here, anything which is linked to godliness doesn't have to be itself that he's learning Torah, he's learning Gemara, and he's davening, he's answering Yom Shmirah. If there's a thought, speech, and action within the system of man that he knows, right? He's honest. Obviously, Avodas Hashem is all about honesty. Someone's going to say, "Oh, really? That really led to Avodas Hashem." My eating that extra chocolate cake even after I was full to capacity, that was all Avodas Hashem because I'm going to learn something in a medrash about chocolate. I mean, that's nonsense, right? We can kid ourselves in Avodas Hashem, but we're dealing with someone who's authentic and his Avodas Hashem is genuine. I mean, to the extent where he works on that itself, the midah of emes, right? Truth in his Avodas Hashem. Things which not necessarily directly are associated with directly associated with Torah mitzvahs, is that classified godly? Even things which are linked, that's what Al Rebbe says, anything which is not linked to Torah mitzvahs remains associated with the nefesh bahamis. But every machshav, every thought or speech and action, which even in itself is not necessarily directly connected to anything godly, but it leads to something and is linked to something which is ultimately associated with Torah mitzvahs, with kedusha, with holiness, with divinity and godliness, that itself is godly. That thought is godly, and that speech is godly, and that action is godly, which is really based on that Rambam. The 24 hours a day a person can serve Hashem, and ought to serve Hashem. So, but on the other hand, conversely, when the Alter Rebbe is trying to classify what is the thought, speech, and action of an animal soul, he doesn't jump to an Aveira, because that's skipping a step over here. It's the world of Kedusha. The whole entire package of the animal soul is the second level, which is, again, that neutral klipa. So when the Alter Rebbe wants to say, what is the thought, speech, and action associated with the Nefesh Bahamis, which is animalistic, which is associated with Nefesh Bahamis and not Kedusha, he doesn't say Aveira, he says everything under the sun, which is not directly and linked to Torah mitzvahs. So we're at the time. Let's just finish the few lines over here. Just finish that at a maybe even at the dot over here. So okay, it's all vanity and all. It's also lashon of the pasuk or the rois ruach. It's negative spirit. Is brought in the Zeir, which is the broken spirit. It's incomplete. Is that how he teaches? What does he say tviru? What does he say the tviru? Usually tviru means broken. Is the word it didn't... I always thought it was the word broken, but we're learning the shir. Let's find out exactly what.
Ruination?
What? Tviru? Where is this? Where is this? Here.
Yeah, ruination of the spirit.
Yeah, ruination of the spirit. Right. So this is, and this is the hevel v'rois ruach, which it's the lashon in again associated with the hevel avolim amashleimei. And this is in the context of action, but also the speech and all thought, which is not associated with God and godliness, not l'ritzayne, not to the Eivishter's desire, and not to the Eivishter's service. This is also the meaning of Sitra Achra. In this context, the Alter Rebbe says, Tzad Achra she'ein tzad HaKedusha. When you say Sitra Achra, many times we use this lashon Sitra Achra on Klippa, on Tumah. Why do we use lashon Sitra Achra on Tumah? Because really you don't want to dignify it with any name, any classification. Like the many times he says, with darkness. What is darkness? It's the absence of light. True darkness, by definition, is tumma, real darkness. So you don't even want to dignify it with a name. This is Sitra. What team are you on? The other team. You don't have a name. The truth is, tumma is not on, because it's truly only the absence of kedusha. But here the Alter Rebbe says, explains the Sitra Achra in this context so beautifully, saying Sitra Achra means you don't have to go all the way to the side of true shalosh groups that made it. Sitra Achra is just the other side. There's kedusha, that's the emes, the other side. How far do you have to go from the other side? Just over the fence. It's Sitra Achra. Anything which is not associated with kedusha, not associated with Hashem, not associated with L'Ritzaini, Hashem's desire, not associated with Hashem's Aveda. Tzad Achra she'ein tzad kedusha, which is not tzad kedusha. What is tzad kedusha? Where Hashem's holiness, the divine holiness, is present, that is the side of Kedusha. And here again you will see, Alter Rebbe, okay, we'll learn about this next week. Alter Rebbe again doesn't use Lashon Torah, mitzvahs. Obviously Torah mitzvahs is Kedusha. Torah mitzvahs is Hashem's Ratzon, Torah mitzvahs Hashem Aveda. But he says, wherever Hashem's presence is, that is Kedusha. Over that, or just one little millimeter away from that, that's already Sitra Achra. What is that? He's going to say, wherever Hashem, where the person demonstrates his submissiveness to Hashem, that is Kedusha. He's batal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He doesn't say batal that it means in the time only when he learns. If he does something with a godly purpose, so he's removing himself, he's subduing, he's subjugating the animalistic dimension which exists within himself for Hashem. That's bittul, and that's where Hashem comes rushing in. So it could be if he sleeps l'shem shamayim, and if he eats for a godly purpose, so that eating is right now different than someone else is eating the same food without a godly purpose. So he's eating it with animalistic intention, and he's eating with a godly intention. Hashem is rushing through right into his eating. So therefore the Alter Rebbe, when he says Ein al Ashrav Am Shachs Mikdushas Al Baruch, and later the Alter Rebbe is going to we'll elaborate on this Beth Shem next week, dealing kedusha, someone submits himself to Kadosh Baruch Hu. What do you mean submitting himself to Kadosh Baruch Hu? It's not only when you sit and learn Torah. If you're doing something for a godly purpose, if you're doing it for a godly purpose, it means you're submitting your natural self, your animalistic self, for a godly purpose. That is bittul. You're subduing your nefesh b'hamis to Hashem. Hashem's kedusha comes rushing through. That is Hashem's kedusha. So really, it should and it could encompass the entire 24 hours. Alter Rebbe says anything other than that, you're 1 millimeter away from that, there is no godly purpose. It's not associated, not with God, not with His desire, not with His service. It's Sitra Achra. It's already, that is associated with the Nefesh B'Ham's animals. Okay. Have a great night.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
I didn't understand. If some the person lives to another world, say his neshama is living.
Mm-hmm.
Two neshamas then living.
Well, the truth of the matter is that it's only his neshama ascends, the godly soul ascends on high, but the godly soul ascends on high with all its achievements in this world. No, just like the body. Does the body ascend on high? No, the body stays down
so
here.
Then the animalistic soul stays
Obviously,
with the body?
Obviously. Or it just disappears. In other words, it doesn't have any function now because the person's body is not alive, so it doesn't have any reason. It's not actually functioning. That's the idea of death, basically. Not so much the godly soul. Godly soul never disconnects from the Yid's reality in this world, the world to come. It what really dies is the disconnect of that energy which is coming through into the Nefesh B'Hamis. The truth of the matter is Nefesh Elikis is also invested in Nefesh B'Hamis via the Nefesh B'Hamis. Nefesh Elikis comes into the group, into the body. But the Nefesh B'Hamis, the animal soul, is bringing the actual life and function to the body. So when the body is not functioning, meaning Nefesh B'Hamis is not there. But the Nefesh Elikis ascends on high. Not only itself, the way it came down, it ascends on high, just like with all the Torah mitzvahs which it accomplished in this world, which it could not accomplish in the previous, in Gan Eden from where it came from, but also with all its accomplishments with the Nefesh B'Hamis. In other words, as much as accomplished that the Nefesh B'Hamis should become closer to God, as much as it accomplished with its body, the body became a refiner body. So it goes up, ascends with the entire package. The Nefesh B'Hamis itself doesn't go to Gan Eden. There's no purpose of the Nefesh B'Hamis going to Gan Eden.
Okay, but when Goy Lehavdeu dies,
yeah,
then his neshama doesn't go up at all, just stays there. So how, when it will be reincarnation,
yes,
good Goyim will come up too?
The answer is there a concept of a good Goy? In the beginning of the first chapter, the Alter Rebbe says that Goyim, not only they don't have an Nefesh Elikis, they don't even have an Nefesh B'Hamis. because the guy's nefesh comes from really from the lower level of klipa shalosh klipas atmeis. And therefore a person doesn't, they cannot marry a guy, because again, they're from completely the other side, by the extreme. Now the Alter Rebbe makes it very clear in other places that this is Alter Rebbe talking about the classic guy, the way the Gemara explains what a guy is. Again, Alter Rebbe didn't come to say a new Torah over here in the Tanya. It came, extracted words of the Talmud and explained it so clearly. The inner dimension of the Talmud, for example, says a word that a guy says, there's a lashon in the Talmud, that himself brings it over here, quotes the Talmud, that a guy would ultimately do something, he will always do something for ulterior motive, or not something which he's going to gain. Even a favor, what he would do. There's something which he always has in mind. What am I going to gain from this? Dr. Rebbe says, why does this exist? He's a human being, like a yid. Dr. Rebbe writes, the inner dimension of the guy comes from klipas shalosh klipas atmeis. So just like shalosh klipas atmeis has no overt kedusha, so too the guy doesn't. Now, Dr. Rebbe himself points out in other places that there are exclusions. We know of history, there was goyim which were sweet and special people. We mentioned the other day, we spoke in the first chapter, the famous Zugiera, talking in the last century. He saved thousands and thousands of Jews without no ulterior motive, and not only that, he knew he was going to be punished. He knew he was going to be reprimanded, and he lived a terrible life to the end of his life. And he knew it very well in the very beginning, but he couldn't see that innocent people are being killed. So he sacrificed his life for the Jewish people. He doesn't fit no form or fashion the classification of Dr. Rebbe in the end of the first chapter. And Dr. Rebbe in other places does also. This is Chasidim Masailim. The Talmud speaks about them. The Rambam deals with them. Those Chasidim Masailim, because they don't fit this description Dr. Rebbe describes in the end of the first chapter, or again that their neshama is solely connected to Shalosh Klipas, because they have some type, they have some kedusha, so they have a chelik leilam haba also. The fact that they have, the reason why they're classified as Chasidim Masailim, because they have goodness. Goodness is associated with kedusha. So when they pass on, the goodness which exists within them ascends on high, and they have a chelik leilam haba. How does leilam haba set up? Goyim Yid, I'm not sure, but it says clearly that the Rambam writes it based on the Talmud that certain goyim do have a chelik leilam haba. But what's behind it is that they have a different type of nefesh, not the classic.
I think the author is speaking in categories.
Generally, there's a general, yes. Generally, like I was saying the other, when we were learning again, this is the first chapter, six chapters ago. In my story, I was the other day meeting somebody regarding the project that involved this humanitarian aid project. So he was meeting this individual. He was really touched by everything. It wasn't the first time I met him, but he had one of his workers there. And he tells her, look what they're doing. They're helping people with food and clothing and shoes, medicine. She picks it up she didn't skip a beat. She says, amazing. Maybe one day we'll be in that position, and we hope someone will help us. Her spontaneity was looking in one direction. It's wonderful because maybe one day we're going to be the victim, someone's going to help us. The notion of completely putting yourself away, you're going to live all your life, a wonderful life, but there are people who are in need, and we're going to go away from our needs and help them. It could be, if she would be explained, something could have entered, but again, that's secondary. Her spontaneity, maybe one day we'll be in need and someone will help us. It's a different approach. It doesn't make them bad. It's just like the approach Alter Rebbe is the chemistry, explaining where does that come from. And this is an expression of the Talmud. They could do favors and they could do good things, but there's always something where they look for themselves, where they're going to gain. So the Alter Rebbe says, where does that come from? You have to say that the inner makeup, the mechanism, and what's behind it is that they have something which has no taiv. Something which is taiv be'etzem, something which is truly, inherently good, will always go away from itself to be good to others without any ulterior motives. And if you see on the surface it doesn't exist, it's because it's associated with Shalosh Klipas atmeis. But again, there are exceptions. Dr. Rebbe himself says in other places, Chasidim Masailim, based on the Talmud, based on the Rambam, and the inner dimension of this is, or the inner reason, because they have some type. That type goes to Elam Haba as well.